This is Charter Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by a new member of the California State Senate. His name is Josh Newman. Senator Josh Newman, you did it. It was a victory like none other, and a victory that took, 3 weeks?
3 weeks after Election Day, yes.
You were never ahead until you were ahead. It took 3 weeks to get ahead.
It took 2 weeks to get ahead.
2 weeks to get ahead?
And then another week to call.
Okay, so for 2 weeks, we all thought, it was a good run, good race, good job. What was that like?
Obviously like nothing I've ever experienced, but I will say the election night party we had was the worst party I think I've ever attended. And so you had I'm a Democrat,
right.
So we had what happened at the national level,
didn't go so
and
well.
you knew that probably about 8 p.m. And then the votes start coming in. They count vote by mail, and you typically a Democrat winds up behind. And then they start counting day of votes, and I get a little closer. And then at about maybe 12:30, they stopped counting, and I was still down 4,000 votes. So.
And you pretty much stayed down 4,000 votes for about
10 days.
10 days.
So, and the problem here was, there were a ton of provisional ballots,
right.
and we've read about that all over California. But the two places where they were probably the most were Orange County and LA County. And my district is in each of those two counties.
Yeah, 95% of your district.
Correct.
LA and Orange County.
Correct. So you only knew there were a bunch of uncounted votes, but you didn't know of those votes which ones applied to my district. So my district, for instance, Orange County includes 20% of Orange County's voters, but we didn't know what the number was. So you don't know if it's 20% of
and
what.
Think about Orange County, which is 75% of your district. I mean, as long as I've known, that's Republican territory. But not this year. Hillary Clinton wins Orange County by almost 10 points, and Josh Newman pulls an upset.
Right. So a Democrat won at the presidential level for the first time since I think FDR.
Right. Even before, I think.
Yeah. And so for me, this seat has been a Republican seat for probably my adult lifetime or longer.
Well,
but Orange County is probably still Republican, but Northern Orange County is probably changing more rapidly than the rest of the county.
Now, your victory was notable for a variety of reasons, including the fact that by you taking that seat, the Democrats gained a supermajority in the state Senate. They had already gained on Election Day a supermajority in the Assembly. You're that 27th seat. And so with that comes a lot of pressure for the Democratic Party as well as you. So talk to us about that 2/3 majority and what that means for you and the Democrats.
So I think where you start in this instance, Brad, is when you look at what's happened in D.C. And the potential impact to national politics, but to California, and specifically on certain issues where we depend on federal revenues for certain programs. It's going to be very important for the legislature to be thoughtful and deliberate about addressing possible shortfalls and policy differences.
Well, let's talk about, for example, immigration. Because we know that immigration is one issue where California and Washington are split.
Right.
And the Trump administration has said that if a governmental entity decides to deem itself sanctuary, whatever that may mean, where they won't allow or won't cooperate with federal officials on immigration matters, that they might withhold federal funding. They did it in the 60s with desegregation. They could flip the script and do it with regard to immigration this time around.
Right. So what'll be interesting is, in California's case, it may be at a state level. I mean, typically when you have
sanctuary state,
we may, I wouldn't use that phrase, but there is, I think, a fairly clear consensus in California about a correct approach and the rights of all residents, including immigrants. So we may see a very big difference in policy.
But look, California relies, like you said, on federal funding. When you combine the threat of the Trump administration to withhold federal funds for governmental entities that don't allow immigration enforcement, with the potential for the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, where California has, 3-4 million that are getting subsidies and or part of the Medicaid extension. I mean, California could be in a whole lot of
So that number gets to be a big number, but the other number to consider is California is itself the 5th largest economy in the world. And we, as a state, constitute about 20% of GDP for the United States. So, you tinker with California's well-being at at the peril of the country's economic well-being. So hopefully there's some trade-offs here.
I hear you. I do. But I also know that the administration in Washington could not have been clearer when they were campaigning. And they were clear about repealing deferred action, DACA. They were clear about repealing Obamacare. And I just am not clear as to how they can get out from under those promises and how it could not present challenges for California when 1.4 million are covered by Covered California in the Affordable Care Act arena. 90% are getting subsidies, and what, 2-3 million went through the Medicaid extension?
Right. But you also have to point out that if we do, if the Affordable Care Act's repealed, and we then revert back to the most vulnerable among us having to go to emergency rooms for urgent care, for other needs, you pay for that anyway, right? So it's not as if we don't pay for that. It's also true that for every dollar California pays into the federal system, we don't get our, necessarily a dollar back.
Right. Well, we're a donor state.
Clearly, clearly. And so, what is the legislature's role? It will be part of a conversation, but I think it was fairly clear on the first day, the day I got sworn in, that both houses took up a resolution on the Assembly side, the Senate side, to make clear our starting point and our priorities with respect to our immigrant residents.
My question becomes then, we look at Texas during the Obama years, and the Attorney General, at the time, now Governor, was very clear that he wanted to be the litigator in chief, and he wanted to sue his way to undo the Obama administration's efforts. Does California take up that mantle? I know you're not the Attorney General, but does, I mean, incoming Attorney General Javier Becerra, but do you believe that we in California, if we want to abide by the principles as passed by the resolutions, need to become the state that is the litigator in chief?
So, the difference I might assert between Texas's previous approach and our prospective approach is they were suing to undo legislation that, to my mind, I think, and to a lot of Californians, brought great progress to our residents and others. If we wind up in that position, we will be suing to maintain that progress, right?
It is a distinction.
To recognize those rights. And also, I do believe there is, irrespective of the campaign, there is a consensus about some of these issues, particularly, not just in California. And so, the Trump campaign may not look exactly like the Trump administration, but their willingness or their ability to actually go as far as we might fear, we'll see it.
With 2/3, the legislature can do a lot, put measures on the ballot, pass taxes. The Democrats have been here before, 3-4 years ago. You weren't there yet, obviously. What do you make of that? I mean, do you rush to get measures in place that you can pass by 2/3 with no Republican support?
You mean as a caucus or me personally?
Either and both.
So let's talk as a caucus. Yeah. As a caucus, I think there are now 27 Democrats by party affiliation in the state Senate. They're not all the same,
of course,
and their constituencies are very different as well. So we are not, as a group, in lockstep on all issues. So there's a bunch of conversations that need to be had that I think will also include our Republican counterparts as well.
Okay. His name is Josh Newman. We call him Senator Josh Newman because he won a seat in the California State Senate in November 2016. My name is Brad Pomerance. We thank you so much for joining us on Charter Local Edition.